There is a kind of fear that does not knock on doors. It does not crawl across ceilings. It does not whisper from the hallway at 3 in the morning. It does not need footsteps, shadows, or locked doors. Because the most terrifying place in the world is the one place you cannot leave, your own mind. Tell me something. Have you ever had a thought that did not feel like yours? A memory arriving without context. A sentence in your head spoken in a voice you do not recognize. A dream so vivid it lingers like evidence after waking. A room that feels subtly wrong, though nothing in it has changed. The slow suspicion that reality itself has shifted half an inch to the left. Psychological horror is different. It does not rush. It settles, quietly, patiently. It lets doubt do the work. Tonight's episode is not about what lives in the dark. It is about what waits in the spaces between certainty and perception. 6 first-person confessions. 6 minds under pressure, 6 descents into fear that may be haunting, madness, memory collapse, or something worse. Each story will begin with something almost ordinary, a harmless observation, a missed call, a forgotten face, a recurring dream. Then slowly, the edges of reality will begin to loosen. And by the final story, the question will no longer be what is happening. The question will be, who is the one noticing it? Welcome to episode 18, Scary Psychological Horror. Dim the lights, keep the room quiet. And as you listen, ask yourself one thing. If fear begins inside the mind, how do you know when it has become real? My name is Leah Whitmore, and before I begin, I need you to answer something honestly. Have you ever caught your own reflection moving just a fraction too soon? Not enough to be obvious, not enough to scream, just enough to make your mind hesitate. A hand lowering before you remember lowering yours. A blink that feels out of sync. A smile arriving on the glass before it reaches your face. Most people dismiss these things. Fatigue, peripheral distortion, a tired brain misreading timing. But tell me, what if the reflection begins reacting before you do? What if it stops waiting for you entirely? Because that is what happened to me. And by the end of the week, I no longer knew which one of us was learning from the other. This happened in Manchester, December. Dark by late afternoon, rain against the windows nearly every evening. I lived alone in a small terrace flat near Deansgate. Nothing unusual about the place. Narrow hallway. Sitting room with one tall standing mirror near the bookcase. The mirror had belonged to my grandmother. Oval glass, dark walnut frame. Older than anything else in the room. The kind of object that feels as though it has observed more lives than the people around it. I never liked it. Not because it looked sinister, because it looked too clear. The reflection was unnervingly sharp. Every detail, every breath fogging the glass when I stood close. Every micro-expression. It made ordinary self-awareness feel invasive. The first incident happened after work. I was removing my earrings in the hallway mirror. Nothing dramatic, just routine. Then I saw it. My reflection's left hand moved toward the clasp before my real hand did. Not by much, a fraction of a second. So slight, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But once you notice temporal misalignment, it becomes impossible to unnotice. The mind begins watching itself. Suspicion enters perception. That is where psychological horror begins. Not with fear, with scrutiny. Tell me honestly, if your reflection moved first, would you dismiss it? Or would you start testing it? I tested it. Of course I did. The next morning I stood before the mirror and raised my hand suddenly. Perfect sync. Sync again, nothing. By the 5th attempt, I began feeling ridiculous. Then I smiled. My reflection smiled first. There it was again, subtle, half a beat early, enough to make my stomach tighten. Tell me something, what is more frightening? A reflection that mimics you perfectly, or one that seems to anticipate you? Over the next 3 days, it escalated. It began with expressions. A frown arriving before I felt concern. Eyes widening before I registered surprise. A slight turn of the head before I heard a sound behind me. Once, while brushing my teeth, the reflection glanced toward the bedroom door before I heard the floorboard creak in the hallway. When I turned, nothing. No one. Just silence. Still, the reflection had heard it first, or known it first. That night, I covered the mirror with a throw blanket. You tell yourself that doing something practical restores control. A barrier. A simple boundary. Object hidden. Problem hidden. But fear does not respect fabric. At 2:27 a.m., I woke to the sound of glass tapping, soft, rhythmic, like fingernails against a window. I followed the sound into the sitting room. The blanket still covered the mirror, but beneath it, movement. The shape of a hand pressing outward from behind the fabric, not on the room side, inside the mirror, pushing. Tell me honestly, if something behind a covered mirror begins pressing outward, would you uncover it? I did. Slowly. The glass was clear. My reflection stood there, perfectly still. Except I was breathing hard. The reflection was not breathing at all. No movement of the chest, no fog on the glass, just stillness. Then it smiled. I had not smiled. Tell me something. If your own face smiles without your consent, what part of you remains yours? From that night onward, I stopped using mirrors, bathroom, lift doors, shop windows, phone camera. Anything reflective made my pulse spike. But the mind adapts strangely to fear. You begin creating avoidance rituals, looking slightly left, walking past windows without glancing, drying your hair by feel. And once you do that, the world begins feeling populated by unseen versions of yourself. Every dark screen becomes a possibility. Every pane of glass, a threat. Then came the first voice. I was in the kitchen making tea, kettle boiling, cabinet open, completely alone. Then from the sitting room, my own voice, soft, flat, emotionless. Leah. Same pitch, same cadence, but empty, as though stripped of breath and feeling. I walked to the doorway. The mirror was angled slightly toward the hall. In the reflection, someone was standing in the kitchen, me, holding the mug, looking toward the sitting room. The exact position I occupied, except the reflected version was already turning to leave the room, a second before I did. Tell me honestly, if your reflection starts predicting your choices, how long before you stop making them freely? I began losing time after that. Small lapses at first, 5 minutes, 10. Standing in one room and suddenly finding myself in another. A cup of tea half finished without remembering drinking it. Messages sent to friends that I did not recall typing. One read simply, "It's easier when she lets me move first." I had no memory of writing it, none. My friend called immediately, worried. I lied, said it was a joke, because explaining the truth would have made it sound like madness, and perhaps it was. But the mirror kept giving me reasons to doubt that. One evening, I came home and found the standing mirror turned toward the front door. I had left it facing the sofa. On the glass, written in condensation as if someone had breathed onto it, "Stop copying me." My hands went cold, because the sentence was reversed, written from inside the reflection, readable only from my side. Tell me something. If your reflection accuses you of imitation, which one of you does it believe is real? I decided to remove it. Middle of the night. Bad decision, perhaps, but fear makes urgency feel rational. I gripped the wooden frame and began dragging it toward the hallway. The glass caught the light from the kitchen, and for 1 second, the room inside the mirror was not my sitting room. Same layout, different details, different lamp, different curtains, and in that reflected room, another woman stood where I should have been. Not me exactly, but close enough. Same height, same hair, different expression, calmer, colder. She stepped toward the glass, raised one hand, placed it against the inside, then said, "You keep interrupting." I heard the voice in the room, not in my head, not from memory, from the mirror, my own voice, detached from me. Tell me honestly, if another version of you believes you are the intruder, what happens when one of you has to remain? I don't remember the glass breaking, only the sound, a sharp collapse, then darkness. I woke in hospital with cuts along both arms and a mild concussion. The paramedics said they found me on the sitting room floor surrounded by shattered glass. But here's the part that still keeps me awake. The mirror pieces were all facing upward, and in every shard my reflection had its eyes closed, except one, a triangular piece no larger than a coin. In that shard, my reflection's eyes were open, watching, blinking independently. I threw every piece away, or I thought I did. 2 nights later, I found a shard on the bathroom sink, no larger than a thumbnail. On it, written in fog from the shower steam, "You're getting slower." Now sometimes when I walk past shop windows at night, I catch sight of myself continuing 3 steps after I've already stopped. And once, only once, I saw the reflection turn and walk down a side street while I remained on the pavement, as if it had somewhere to be, somewhere I had not yet gone. My name is Nathan Cole, and before I begin, I need you to think carefully about something. What makes a memory a memory? Is it the fact that it happened, or simply the feeling that it already belongs to the past? Because memory is less reliable than most people want to admit. It does not replay life like a recording. It reconstructs, edits files, fills in gaps with emotion and assumption. But tell me, what if you begin remembering things before they happen? Not predicting, not guessing, remembering. With all the weight, texture, and emotional certainty of something already lived. Because that is what happened to me. And by the end of the week, I was no longer sure whether I was moving forward through time or simply arriving late to a life I had already experienced. This happened in Seattle. Late January, rain most evenings, gray mornings, the kind of weather that flattens time into one long, dim corridor. I worked as a data analyst for a logistics firm downtown. Routine job, routine hours, routine life. That matters, because psychological horror always enters through the ordinary. If chaos is already expected, fear has nowhere to root. But when life is predictable, the smallest fracture feels catastrophic. The first memory arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was standing in line at a coffee shop near Pike Place. Nothing unusual. People half awake, soft jazz over the speakers, steam hissing from the espresso machine. Then, all at once, I remembered the barista dropping a ceramic mug. Not imagined it, remembered it. The sharp crack, the gasp from the woman behind me, coffee splashing across the counter, the exact look of surprise on the barista's face. It came with that strange, intimate certainty real memory carries. A feeling of already lived. Then, 3 seconds later, the mug slipped from her hand. Shattered exactly as I had remembered. Same sound, same splash pattern, same gasp behind me. Tell me honestly, if you vividly remember an event seconds before it occurs, do you call that intuition? Or something much worse? I told myself it was coincidence. Pattern recognition. The brain processing microsignals faster than conscious awareness. A rational explanation, a safe one. But by lunchtime, it happened again. I was in the office lift, doors halfway closed. Suddenly I remembered my colleague Simon rushing toward the doors, spilling papers, apologizing breathlessly. Then, exactly that. He came running down the corridor, stack of folders slipping from his hands. Same words, same expression, same frantic laugh. Again, not prediction, memory. I felt it in my body the way old experiences settle into you, like something filed away, stored, retrieved. Tell me something. What happens when the future starts arriving with the emotional weight of the past? By Wednesday, the memories stretched further. Minutes ahead, then hours. I remembered a conversation with my sister that had not yet happened, her telling me our mother was thinking of selling the family house. I even remembered the ache in my chest when she said it. That evening, my phone rang. My sister. Word for word, the same conversation, same pauses, same sigh before the sentence about the house. I finished one of her lines before she spoke it. Silence on the phone. Then she asked, "How did you know I was going to say that?" I had no answer, because the truth sounded insane. Tell me honestly, if your memories begin outrunning time itself, how long before you stop trusting the present? I started writing them down, a notebook beside my desk. Timestamps, descriptions, every memory as it arrived. At first it was manageable, a dropped pen, a phone call, a passing phrase. Then Thursday morning, I remembered something that froze my blood. A car accident. Intersection of 5th and Pine. Black SUV running the red light. A cyclist thrown across wet asphalt. The metallic scream of brakes. The sound of a body hitting the ground. I remembered it with such force that I nearly doubled over. And it was scheduled, if that is even the word, to happen in about 20 minutes. I knew the intersection. It was on my walking route. Tell me something. If you remember a tragedy before it occurs, are you responsible for what comes next? I ran, rain hitting my coat, heart pounding. I reached the intersection just in time to see the cyclist approaching. Same yellow rain jacket from the memory, same black SUV turning the corner. I shouted, loud enough for the cyclist to hesitate. That tiny hesitation saved him. The SUV blew through the light exactly as remembered, missed him by inches. No impact, no blood, no scream. The event had changed, or rather, I had changed it. That should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Because the moment the cyclist avoided the car, I felt something tear inside my head. A sharp pressure behind my eyes. Then a new memory slammed into place. Not of the accident, of me standing there afterward. A woman beside me saying, "You weren't supposed to stop at this time." I turned. A woman in a navy coat stood at the curb, late 30s, dark hair pinned back, umbrella closed at her side despite the rain. Her face was familiar in the deeply unsettling way strangers sometimes are in dreams. Then she walked away into the crowd, and I remembered seeing her before, not in life, in other memories, standing at the edge of events, watching. Tell me honestly, if the future resists being altered, what exactly are you interfering with? Sleep became impossible, because the memories no longer stopped while I was awake. I began dreaming in reverse, dreams that felt less like imagination and more like recollection. Scenes from the following day, tomorrow's conversations, tomorrow's mistakes, tomorrow's grief. Friday night, I remembered attending Simon's funeral. I saw the church, the rain, the black umbrellas, his mother crying into a handkerchief, the sickening certainty that he was dead. But Simon was alive. At least he was when I left the office. I called him immediately. No answer. Then a new memory struck. His apartment, bathroom tiles, a bottle of sleeping pills on the sink, the smell of whiskey. Tell me something. If you remember someone's death before it happens, how far are you willing to go to prevent it? I drove straight to his apartment. He answered after the third knock, alive, drunk, devastated after a breakup. The pills were on the sink exactly as remembered, the same label, the same half-full glass beside them. He stared at me and asked the question that still haunts me. How did you know? I had no explanation. Only the terrible realization that the future was not merely approaching, it was remembering itself through me. I stayed with him until dawn. He slept. I didn't, because every hour brought more memories, some trivial, some catastrophic. One of them was me in my apartment bathroom at 2:14 a.m., staring into the mirror, whispering, "I've already done this." At exactly 2:14 a.m., I found myself standing there. Same position, same reflection, same words already on my lips. I stopped myself before speaking, and that was when the mirror version of me finished the sentence, 37 times. Tell me honestly, if your reflection remembers previous versions of the same moment, what does that make the present? The notebook became my only anchor, until I realized something far worse. Some entries were in my handwriting, but I had not written them. Different pen pressure, same letters, slightly older version of my script. One page simply read, "Loop 31 failed. Simon survives, intersection altered, subject aware, reset imminent, reset." The word made no sense. Until the next morning, Saturday, I woke to Tuesday. Same rain, same coffee shop, same jazz track, same barista lifting the ceramic mug, the exact beginning of the week. Again. This time I knew what would happen, because I had already remembered it, because I had already lived it, because somehow memory had become the mechanism of recurrence. Tell me something. If the mind can retain fragments across loops, what part of reality is actually repeating? The woman in the navy coat found me that afternoon. Same calm expression, same dark hair pinned back. She sat across from me in the coffee shop and quietly said, "You're close." I asked who she was. She smiled, then answered, "Loop 12, you called me your wife." My entire body went cold. Because in that instant, a flood of impossible memories crashed through me. A wedding, a hospital corridor, a child laughing in autumn leaves, her face across a dinner table, whole years of life that did not belong to this week. Or perhaps they did. Perhaps they belonged to other loops. Other attempts, other versions of me. She reached across the table, touched my hand and said, "You keep trying to stop the wrong death." Then she left, and another memory began forming, a memory of tomorrow, of the final reset, of someone who never survives, someone whose name I still cannot bring myself to say. And now the night grows quieter. The stories are over, but the feeling they leave behind is not. Because psychological horror does not end when the narration stops. It follows, it lingers in the spaces between thoughts, in the moments just before sleep, in the silence after a sound you cannot explain. Tonight, we did not walk through haunted houses. We did not stand in forests, hotels, trains, or forgotten roads. Tonight, we entered the one place every listener carries with them, the mind. And perhaps that is why this episode feels different. Because no locked door can keep out what already lives behind your own eyes. A voice that should not know your thoughts. a dream that leaves fingerprints in waking life, a reflection that moves before you decide to move, a memory that arrives wearing someone else's grief, a future that feels strangely remembered, a name that sounds familiar, though it has never belonged to your life. Tell me something, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever stood in a room and felt certain you had already lived that exact moment? Have you ever looked at your own face in the mirror and, for just a second, felt like a stranger was looking back? Have you ever remembered pain that you cannot trace to any real event? Because if you have, perhaps tonight's stories touched something deeper than fear. Perhaps they touched recognition. The most unsettling thing about the mind is not that it can imagine horror, it is that it can blur the line between what was imagined and what was lived. And once that line begins to fade, what remains certain? Maybe that sudden thought in the dark was never yours. Maybe the dream you woke from did not fully end. Maybe the memory you keep replaying belongs to a version of yourself you no longer are. Or maybe the mind is far less private than we have always believed. So tonight, as the room settles into silence, listen closely to your own thoughts. Pay attention to the memories that arrive too vividly, the faces that appear in dreams, the corners of the room that seem slightly different in the morning, the reflection that blinks a fraction too late. Because fear does not always knock. Sometimes it remembers you first. You've been listening to Mr. Haunting Whispers TV, where the scariest stories are the ones that stay with you after the lights go out. If tonight's whispers found their way under your skin, make sure you return for the next episode. Because next time, the horror may not come from the mind. It may come from what has been waiting just outside it. Until the next whisper, sleep lightly, trust your thoughts carefully, and if a memory feels too real to be yours, do not follow it too far into the dark.
You've been listening to Mr. Haunting Whispers, where every truth leaves a scar. If the story unsettled you, good. That means you were listening. Subscribe and stay close to the dark, because the next whisper might be for you.